I came across a poem this week written by a woman named Louise Hayes, which seemed to be very appropriate for today. So I'm going to read it, and after that we'll have our moment of silence. It's called North Alameda, June 2025. City of Angels, we hear your cry across stolen land, where no man is illegal, no woman unseen, no child unloved. We see the signs held up by arms, bearing the weight of freedom, of fairness, while weapons face their words of peace. No process, no rights, denied the chance that our ancestors got with a glance. How else but by fortune go you and me? Snatched on the sidewalk, captured in classrooms, dragged away from Home Depot, just looking for work, with kids now looking for dad, for mom, for an explanation why liberty and justice is no longer for all. No kings, no queens, no troops rule these streets. East Aliso, North Main, Los Angeles, we'll see. Don't ever back down, don't ever not speak. And now for a moment of silence. Okay, thank you all. So as you know, we have a abbreviated meeting today, and thanks everybody for coming up early. For those of you who are going to the No Kings protest that's being run by Villagers for Democracy, there are some signs. They look like this. They have different messages on them. They're very light. There will be some of them available on the way out the door that goes directly outside. And if you get one, you just ask that you return it to the table that will be at the rally. There's going to be somebody giving out signs there as well, and if you just bring them back to the rally. And also, please don't forget to drop your lanyards in the baskets or by the door. Okay, so this is Pride Month, as I'm sure everybody knows. So we've had a couple of... So we have a couple of speakers who are going to bring us up to date a bit on, what's going on in Florida with regard to LGBTQ rights. So I'm going to introduce Bill Vanes, who is a member of the club and is the treasurer for the Sumter County DEC. And he's going to introduce our main speaker.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, Villagers Democrats. You know, when I go to other parts of the state and I tell people I'm from the Villages, I get this look like, are there any other Democrats there? And I have to remind them that the Villages Democratic Club is the largest Democratic club in the state. And the most energetic. If I could put my DEC hat on a moment, if other counties, such as, let's just say South Florida, were as well run as the Sumter Democratic Party, we would win every state election. As Amy said, I'm the treasurer of the Sumter Democratic Party. I'm also the precinct captain for 126, which used to be just Monarch Grove and Linden, but is now growing rapidly as we add Well Point, and I gotta look it up now, Oak Hollow and Edenfield. My precinct is growing by leaps and bounds, and we can always use another precinct captain down there, so let me know if you're interested. I am also the secretary of the LGBTQ plus Democratic Caucus of the Nature Coast region. It's a mouthful to say. We've been trying to shorten it, haven't figured that out yet. And we represent our community in Sumter County, in Citrus County, and in Hernando County. And this month we are having 3 pride events, one in each of our counties. This afternoon there's one over in Crystal River. Next Thursday down in Brooksville. And on the 30th here in Sumter County at the DEC headquarters, where we'll once again welcoming Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith. I do have a few hats. I'm also one of the founders and former secretary of the state GLBT Democratic Caucus. You'll notice there are some letters and things missing there. In recent years, we've shuffled the letters, we've added letters, we've made it an equation by putting a plus sign at the end of it. And recently I've served as treasurer for the organization. We have 20 chapters statewide, and our goal is to keep Tallahassee on their toes about equality. After my husband and I moved to South Florida just after the 2000 election, I'm sitting there retired wondering how am I going to spend my time. And I wandered into a campaign office for Dean Trantalis, who was running to become the first openly gay man on the Fort Lauderdale City Council. And they discovered that I had an ability for maps and making walk lists way before we had things like the van that did it automatically for us. And we discovered that by going door to door and knocking on people's doors and meeting them face to face, we actually turned that election around and elected Dean the first openly gay commissioner in Fort Lauderdale. And I'm proud to say that Dean is now the mayor of Fort Lauderdale. And then I worked on a congressional campaign to try and elect a gay man. That didn't work out. And then a couple of state campaigns. And it was in 2012 that I was, no, 2010 that I was working on a campaign for Justin Flippin to get him elected to the state house. And I met this brash, kind of wet behind the ears political activist by the name of Carlos Smith. I don't think he was using Guillermo at that point. I just knew him as Carlos. And I was impressed. I thought, yeah, he's got some potential. See how this goes. And then about the time I moved to the Villages in, 2012, I was contacted by Joe Saunders, who I knew from South Florida, who was going to run for the State House in Orlando in District 49. And guess who shows up again but Carlos Guillermo Smith. I think he was using Guillermo at that point. And we actually elected Joe to the State House, and along with another man, the first time we had representation in the State House in Tallahassee. Unfortunately, the Republican Party did not like that at all, and they threw gads of money in the following election, and Joe was defeated. A sad day for some of us. However, 2 years later, a certain Mr. Smith said, you know what, I'm gonna run for that seat. And he must have done a good job because he scared away the incumbent who moved to another district, just so he wouldn't have to face it. And Carlos was elected, subsequently re-elected, and then in 2022, thanks to our legislature and their amazing abilities to gerrymander our districts, they made his district much redder by bringing in parts of Osceola County and taking away parts of Orange County. And it was a close election, but we went down to defeat. But doors always open for people like Carlos, and the Senate seat for that area opened up in 2024, and Carlos decided to run for that. And once again, scared away the opposition and actually ran unopposed. Carlos is also the senior policy advisor for Equality Florida, and we've run into each other through that venue as well over the years. But when you're fighting an uphill battle for diversity, equality, and inclusion, and please note that I use those words because I think it's important that we let the other side know what DEI really means. It's diversity, equality, and inclusion. Having a seat at the table in Tallahassee in the person of Carlos Guillermo Smith is not only necessary, but I find it personally inspiring. And I'm proud to have watched his career bloom over the years, and I'm proud to be able to call him my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith. I was reminded that the subject TVDC is having a gala at the end of July featuring David Jolly, the Democratic candidate for governor. Go to our website, you can get all the information about it. It should be another spectacular event.
Bill is so amazing. Round of applause for Bill. Well, hi, good morning. Thank you. It is so great to be back at the Village's Democratic Club. Is that too loud? No. Oh, no. Okay, all right. I want to make sure. I saw some of the Barbaras back there. Were responding. Shout out to the Barbaras in the fourth row, by the way. Right. Good morning. I'm Carlos Guillermo Smith, and I've been called a lot of things. I have not been called wet behind the ears in a very long time. So thank you for that, Bill. Happy Pride Month to everyone. Again, it is great to be back in the Villages where we say gay, don't we? We say gay here in the Villages, and I'm proud to say I'm your gay state senator. So technically, I'm not your state senator. Actually, as Bill was saying, I represent Senate District 17, which is in Orlando in East Orange County, but I was elected to the Florida Senate actually in November of last year to represent all Floridians, not just some. And all of those Floridians, I mean, it includes our friends here in Sumter County, our friends in Lake County, our friends in Marion County. I'm here to represent all y'all. So when you look up your state senator and you're like, I don't know, this person represents me, just know that actually Carlos Guillermo Smith is proud to be your voice in the Florida Senate. Because I represent the folks here in the Tri-County area in the Villages who, like me, believe in freedom and equality and justice for all, right? I heard that during the Pledge of Allegiance, there was a special emphasis on justice for all that came from the crowd, which I really appreciate and am very grateful for, because I think sometimes people forget it's about freedom and equality and justice for everyone, not just some. I know that you all here in the Villages, who I consider my friends, I've come here, this is, I think, the third time that I've spoken officially in front of the Villages Democratic Club. I know that you all understand there are no kings in America, am I right? To do what's right, to stand up, to fight back against extremism and against extreme politics. I'm talking to you actually today on day 103 of the 2025 legislative session. Day 103. And for those who don't know, every year the Florida legislature has a 60-day legislative session. So we are way into overtime right now, because I don't know if you heard, but Republican infighting has actually stalled budget negotiations, or did stall budget negotiations for a long time, and we came dangerously close to what would have been an unprecedented state government shutdown. I say we came close, and it would have been a shutdown, because the final budget was actually published at 10:04 p.m. last night. There's actually a constitutionally required 72-hour cooling off period after the Florida state budget is published, that we are not allowed to vote on the budget for 72 hours. So basically, we're being called back to Tallahassee. I was telling a few folks here before I started speaking that I'll be riding up to Tallahassee with my work wife, also known as Dr. Anna V. Escamani, who's my friend friend in this work, my colleague, and also she's my roommate in Tallahassee, so we go through a lot of things together up there fighting the good fight. We'll be heading back to Tallahassee and literally voting on the budget in the Florida House and Senate like late Monday night. Some of us will return back to our districts on Monday night. I will actually return the next day on Tuesday. But there's going to be so much in this budget, and I know that we're going to have time for Q&A later because the state budget addresses things like funding for the environment, for land conservation, for water projects, transportation infrastructure, healthcare, funding for the arts, and certainly public education. And we know that there's a lot going on right now, but it is really, I think, very, very much a proud moment for me to be joining you during Pride Month, during June. Because Pride Month is obviously very special to me as an LGBTQ person, as it is to many of you, LGBT or allied or accomplices, as we'd like to call some of you. In 2016, I was elected to the Florida House, as Bill mentioned. I served for 3 two-year terms when I was there, and my campaign in 2016 made history because I was the first LGBTQ Latino to ever be elected to the Florida legislature. And that was really important then in 2016, I believe, because representation for all communities, especially marginalized communities that are constantly under attack for political reasons, need representation and need to have a seat at the table. And I knew representation would matter, but this is even before the notorious attacks of don't say gay and don't say trans, before all of the book banning that so much of it focused on book banning of literature that included queer voices, LGBT characters, or LGBTQ stories. And it was certainly before all of the anti-trans and anti-drag queen and anti-fun, honestly, extreme agenda. Right? Like, my gosh, how miserable are these people? Still want to have fun. But in spite of some pretty devastating election results in November 2024. Fun fact, Florida actually doubled LGBTQ representation in the Florida legislature, and we did it in both chambers. In both chambers. So we doubled LGBTQ representation in the Florida Senate. We had one before. My good friend and colleague, State Senator Shepard Jones, who represents parts of Miami-Dade County in South Florida. And so you're looking at the doubling of representation right here in the Florida Senate. When I was elected, we went from 1 to 2. And then the Florida House as well. We previously and still have Representative Michelle Rayner, who's an out lesbian in St. Petersburg, serving in the Florida House. But we elected Mitch Rosenwald, an out gay man who represents Broward County in the Florida House of Representatives. So that doubled the representation in the Florida House as well. So, but this is progress, and in the wake of all of these attacks that our community has endured, which aren't new. We know that they're not new because attacks on LGBTQ people have always been used as a political strategy, right? As a political diversion used by Republicans to distract us certainly from their failed policies, their inability to address real issues like soaring costs and property insurance rates and all of the various crises that we're dealing with as a state that have nothing to do with someone's gender or their sexual orientation or their gender identity. None of these problems that we're facing as a state that are hitting our pocketbooks very hard have anything to do with queer people, do they? No. Nothing. So it's really just a strategy to divide us. But I think Pride Month every year, but certainly this year, provides us with an opportunity. It provides us with an opportunity to, I think, in my opinion, raise our flags even higher than they have ever been before. Because people ask me all the time, they say, hey, what can I do to oppose this new wave of anti-LGBTQ attacks? We want to be allies, we want to be seen as helpful. I mean, usually there's a pretty long list of things that you can do, but honestly, the most impactful thing can sometimes be the simplest. For example, raising a rainbow flag in your neighborhood, or at your place of work if you can, or at your home or in your window if your association allows, my goodness. Raising the rainbow flag or raising the trans flag to show not only your pride, but to show an act of solidarity. I mean, doesn't it feel like it's been kind of a cycle? Like there were times in your life earlier in your lives where it was like such a political statement to raise a rainbow flag, and then over time it didn't feel like it was really that big of a political statement anymore, but you still did it. And now suddenly it's like, oh my God, it's a political statement again, like I have to do this, right? And that's what I mean when I say, sometimes the simplest acts can actually have the most impact. Whether it be that, or whether it be, if you have a grandchild or an LGBTQ niece or nephew or young person that's in your life, showing them support and being affirming to them is something that actually can make a huge impact. These are different acts of resistance, I think, that you can take against these attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, against those who want to erase us and bring us backwards and erase the progress that we've made. That's what Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were fighting for 56 years ago at the Stonewall riots in New York City. They were standing for freedom, they were standing for equality, and they were standing against discrimination. And during Pride Month, we have to remember them. We have to remember the LGBTQ pioneers, because doing so, it is a celebration of liberation, of self-identity, and of being different and being proud of that. And that's something that is a universal theme that everyone can relate to, whether you identify as LGBTQ or not. Since 2016, Pride Month has always been very surreal for many of us in the LGBTQ community, particularly in Florida, particularly in Central Florida, particularly in Orlando. And I'll tell you why. Because during Pride Month in June, on June 12th, we also have to remember to honor them with action. And I'm talking about the horrific tragedy at Pulse nightclub that happened on June 12th, 2016, that stole the lives of 49 angels, mostly LGBTQ and Latino people of color. That was a 9-year remembrance that our community acknowledged just 2 days ago, just 2 days ago. And what I shared with folks in the community on Thursday, and I did on social media as well, and I want to share it with you here at the Villages Democratic Club. One of the ways, the best ways to remember those who were taken by hatred and gun violence is to honor them with action. If you're a social media person like I am, to use that hashtag, honor them with action, to share what you are doing to stand up and fight back against discrimination, against homophobia, against transphobia, against gun violence, that is a good message of solidarity that you can send during this really, really important time this summer during Pride Month. So speaking of, I suppose, the political environment that we are in, we know our rights and freedoms are under siege, perhaps in a way that they have not been since the days of Anita Bryant. How many of you remember Anita Bryant? Right? Seems like Anita Bryants are everywhere these days. And what we've seen in the second Trump regime now is his willingness to move very quickly via executive orders especially, and without regard to the law, or without regard to the devastating consequences that its actions can have on the lives of everyday Americans. And we know that that's a real threat. That's why we're protesting today. But I want to tell you some specifics because I think it's important for you to know what we're facing and what has been deeply impactful to our community so far. Since January, we have seen a devastating wave of attacks specifically on HIV prevention and treatment funding. So that's coming from certainly the Trump administration. They're slashing funding for research. They are, RFK Jr., right? He's over there at the health department shutting down vaccine trials, all kinds of vaccine trials, including HIV vaccine trials that are very promising as far as actually demonstrating the capability to be the cure to HIV. Firing scientists, eliminating life-saving programs. We know that their agenda is very clear. They want to dismantle progress, they want to politicize public health, and they want to erase vulnerable communities like LGBTQ folks. And if you look at Trump's new budget proposal, you see that it's going to gut over $1.5 billion from HIV-related programs specifically, cuts that would result, based on the data, in likely 143,000 new infections of HIV or transmissions, nearly 15,000 deaths, and billions of dollars in avoidable healthcare costs. And it gets even worse because I'd like to bring up your favorite topic, Trump's big, horrifically ugly bill. So there's a lot in there, but also tucked away in a late night amendment on this big, ugly bill is an amendment that would ban Medicaid and CHIP from covering life-saving medically necessary care for transgender people of all ages. It would strip essential protections from the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare. And we know that if it is passed, it's going to put life-saving care, as I mentioned, out of reach for trans people across the country, and it would threaten reproductive health care, specifically by defunding Planned Parenthood for any services. We already know that they're prohibited from receiving taxpayer funds for abortion services, but they do so much more than that. That's only part of the services, the healthcare services that they provide. This is part of a much broader agenda when we're talking about the big ugly bill, whose goal is to find taxpayer dollars to save so that they can issue tax breaks for billionaires and giant corporations, so that they can fund ramped up deportations, which, by the way, are actively, as we speak, disappearing families. Disappearing families that have committed no crimes, because in a majority of cases, actually being undocumented in the United States is a civil offense. It is not a criminal offense. And so for those who have committed no crimes while living in the United States with unregulated status, we're seeing that those families are being disappeared. Disappeared not when they run from law enforcement. In many cases, they're being disappeared when they run towards government, when they show up for their immigration hearings, when they are complying with the immigration process and they are following the rules. They are showing up and they are being immediately detained and disappeared. Yesterday, I joined, some of you actually told me that you saw me on the news yesterday at an immigration rally in Orlando, in Apopka, not far. And basically, a group of us were rallying behind the Juarez family. The reason we were rallying behind them is the Juarez family, I believe, has 4 children who are all minors. And both parents, the mom and the dad, are undocumented. They've committed no crimes. In fact, they were witnesses of crimes and have U visa protections from deportation. U visas are issued to folks who have witnessed crimes to ensure their protection so that they can comply with law enforcement. They can help law enforcement actually apprehend actual violent criminals, not just people who witnessed violent crimes or were victims of violent crimes themselves. And a few weeks ago, the father showed up for an immigration hearing. He was detained during that hearing, and he was deported, I believe, to Guatemala. They found that out weeks later because initially he disappeared after he was detained. His family was not able to make contact with him, and for quite some time they did not know where he was until it was confirmed they found him in the system. He'd been deported to another country, not his original country. The rally yesterday was to show support and to ask federal officials to release the mother, because the mother now left without her husband and father of her children that had been deported and disappeared, was now facing the same thing. And she did go to her immigration hearing, and she was detained. She was not deported. And so we were rallying behind this family, urging ICE to please release her because she's not committed any crimes. She has children. She should not be prioritized in this extreme mass deportation movement that we're seeing across the country. We received news late last night that, in fact, our request to release her was denied, and she was deported. And she's gone. I want you to pray and show solidarity for their children, because we do not know what they will do. They are all U.S. citizens. They are all naturalized U.S. citizens. This is what we are protesting against. This and so much more. And by the way, 2 days ago, I don't want to get on an immigration tangent. 2 days ago, a new policy was announced and began to be enforced that hundreds of thousands, I think around 500,000 legal immigrants who were granted entry to the United States under a specific parole program authorized by the federal government from Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. They received notice from the Trump regime that their legal status was being revoked, that if they had any work permit documentation or identification, they needed to immediately surrender it, and that if they didn't immediately return to their home country, they would be deported. Legal immigrants whose legal status was just revoked overnight. So folks, we're facing some pretty scary times. I mean, like I said, families are being disappeared. We have, the president has federalized the National Guard against US residents, and US senators are being handcuffed for asking questions.
Terrible.
Which sounds like Russia.
Yeah.
It sounds like North Korea. It sounds like Nicaragua or Venezuela, but it's not. It's our country now. It's the United States of America, which is why it is so important for us to use our voices to fight back. I saw a headline in the Miami Herald before I arrived, and the headline said, DeSantis says you can run over protesters. Is this true? That was the headline. No, it is not true.
It's true he said it.
It's true he said it. It is not true. But this moment and headlines like that are the reasons why Democrats like myself, when we were then serving in the Florida House of Representatives in 2021, we opposed that law because we knew and feared it would one day be dangerously weaponized against us. You have a constitutional right. Please hear me when I tell you this. You have a constitutional First Amendment right to peacefully assemble and to peacefully protest this regime. But please be careful out there. Please, 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 please be careful out there. Stay on public sidewalks. Stay on public sidewalks. Don't escalate confrontations. Don't take the bait. I am optimistic that things are going to go well today, but I just want you to be safe. And I will be there with you, by the way. I feel like I should take some of my notes here and just throw them in the trash. I was reading them for a little bit, looking at them, and I'm just like going off on all these tangents. So speaking of fighting back, we also know, I mean, Pride is, we know, is a celebration, but also it's a call to action. We know how to fight back, by the way, because Project 2025 is actually Florida 2023 and 24, isn't it? I mean, we've kind of, feels like we've already, like a lot of the Trump stuff. Didn't you get deja vu when you heard the Trump stuff? You're like, wait, wasn't that the DeSantis thing? Right? They're taking their playbook. I wanna have time for questions, but I wanna leave you with some good news before I get the stage hook. So, good news is there were like 5 or 6 really bad anti-LGBTQ bills that were filed in the Florida legislature this year, as usual. All of them were stopped and were defeated. All of them were stopped and defeated, which is a testament to people power.
Yeah.
It is a testament to public pressure. And it's certainly a sign that even conservative Republican lawmakers in the supermajority are more and more weary of wanting to take up these socially divisive issues. Mostly because they worry that when they take them up, that their entire legislative hearing is going to be derailed by hundreds of people who show up in opposition. That's not a theory. I heard that from a Republican Senate colleague who I serve with. Because I told him, and he'll remain unnamed, but I told him, I was just having a conversation with him, trying to find common ground. And he asked me, he said, what's your day job? What do you do outside of, being a senator? I'm an attorney, but what do you do, Carlos? I said, well, I'm the senior policy advisor for Equality Florida. He said, those people? He said, every time one of the bills they oppose gets put on the agenda in one of our committees, we can't hear it because hundreds of people show up in opposition to issue public comments. People power. So yeah, if you're probably like pulling your hair out when they don't listen, when we go to Tallahassee, it's pointless, they don't listen. Au contraire. Oh, they get frustrated, and sometimes it's a temporary postponement, but it's a temporary postponement that's necessary, and that comes as a result of your work. So here's what I know. Scapegoating will not solve problems, whether it's scapegoating transgender people or scapegoating immigrants. Compassion and truth will. And Bill said it when he introduced me. There's been a lot of ups and downs here in Florida, including for me personally. Yeah, I served in the House for 6 years. I told the truth a lot. That's why the far right made me a top target in my House re-election in 2022. But I didn't give up. I did not get discouraged. I did not let that electoral defeat define me or keep me for standing up for what's right. And I think I told you that when I came and spoke to the Villages Democratic Club early last year when I was still running for state senate. But now I am a state senator. And I was elected to the Florida Senate. And what's funny is that my opponent in 2022, who defeated me to win a seat in the lower chamber, she at the time called me a political agitator. Now she calls me her state senator. Which is pretty amazing. So stand up and fight back. Don't get discouraged. Don't give up. Because we the people remain the guardrails of our own democracy. And the other thing that I'll leave you with, and I mentioned it before about being, like, what can you do? I mentioned something about being supportive and affirming of LGBTQ youth. Here's a statistic. According to the Trevor Project, we know that LGBTQ youth, if they have just one supportive or affirming adult in their life, who communicates that to them, they are 40% less likely to have suicidal ideation. You can make a big impact with the smallest gesture of solidarity and support. So love wins, be that role model and supporting adult in that young LGBTQ person's life. And if we have time, I would, little bit of time, you better make some really short questions for me. I would love to take questions before we go rally for our rights and freedoms for all. Thank you all. Especially since we didn't really get to talk about the budget that I'm about to vote on Monday, which is $115 billion worth of your money.
I have a non-LGBTQ question.
Hit me.
I would love to see Florida pass a law to legalize assisted suicide for terminally ill people.
So would I. So, I don't want to say that I want to be PC, but I don't believe it's assisted suicide. It's medical aid in dying. And I say that because I think it's important to talk about it in different ways, because I think sometimes when we call it that, it actually makes people want to oppose it like even more. I've been approached, sir, by some organizations who also have the same mission to want to pass that very good law, because it's cruel and inhumane when someone is dying, to not be able to have options to just die comfortably the way that they want, and giving them the choice. So, sir, thank you. I will be pursuing and looking for ways actually to bring forward such legislation, because I think it's important in Florida. And thank you for the question. There's other states that have it too. Other states that have it. Thank you, sir. Yes.
In 2016, I communicated with the powers that be in the villages concerning political signs in people's yards, but primarily I was concerned about flags. And I received communication back from them that a flag is neutral and therefore is okay to be used. So I would encourage us all to raise our neutral pride flag.
You raise that neutral pride flag, yes. Raise that flag.
So I heard that in Texas they banned all marijuana medical. Is that true? Is it possible in Florida?
In
Of
Texas?
course, because they banned marijuana.
That's wild.
Pharmaceutical companies can double price on painkillers.
That's why I didn't know that they did that in Texas. They cannot do that in Florida. They, like the question, like, can they ban medical cannabis in Florida? No, because more than 60% of you Florida voters changed the Constitution to legalize medical cannabis. So it is a constitutional right that cannot be taken from us. Thank you all. Happy Pride! Happy Pride! And I am so looking forward, Amy, to returning to the Villages Democratic Club very soon. Love you all. Thank you.
So thanks again for Senator Smith to coming. And I know everybody's anxious to get going. In your lanyard, if you are going to the protest, there's a little map. It's darn near microscopic, so I apologize for that. I didn't make them. But it'll show you where it's okay to park and not park. And in the meantime, those of you who are going, we'll see you there. Be careful, as Carlos said. And otherwise, thank you all for coming to the meeting. It's always great to be in a room full of Democrats.